Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and get started, and then if more folks join us, we'll be pleased to have them. So welcome everyone to part 2 of the Tools to Engage webinar series. Today we'll be looking at the Barrett House and the Common Good Action Project. We're so glad you're all here. Just a few housekeeping notes. All attendees are in listen-only mode today, which means we can't hear or see you, but you can go ahead and use the chat function on Zoom to submit questions at any time, and then there will be an opportunity later in the webinar for the panelists to answer as many of those questions as we get to. You just want to make sure that you send the chat to all panelists and not to everyone unless you want all of the attendees to see your question as well. So I'm just going to briefly go over our agenda today. We're going to do a quick introduction just so you know who we are, who the Building Movement Project is, and what the Tools to Engage webinar series is. We'll then be hearing from Leah who will be telling us about today's tool, the Common Good Action Project. And then Connie Chavez will be telling us about her organization's experience of actually applying that tool. We'll then be going into that question and answer section where Connie and Leah can answer some of the questions you submit using that chat function. And then I'll leave you with a few additional tools to take back to your organization before we let you go. So without further ado, Connie, will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, and thanks for having me. My name is Connie Chavez. I'm the Executive Director of the Barrett Foundation in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thanks. Leah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Steimel. I'm a local consultant here for Building Movement Project and been primarily responsible for the Common Good Action Project over the past 2 years or so.
Great. And I'm Noelia Mann. I'm the Communications and Operations Coordinator for the Building Movement Project, and I'm based in New Orleans, Louisiana. So before we move on, just want to go back to some of those housekeeping notes for the folks who have just joined the call. All attendees are in listen-only mode right now, which means that we can't hear or see you, but you can use your chat function to submit any questions or comments that you have at any time during the presentation, and there will be an opportunity for Connie and Leah to answer your questions a little bit later on in the presentation. You may also choose to put your video in speaker-only mode. That way you'll only be able to see the video of the speaker who's actually speaking, and it might just save a little bit of space on your screen so you can also follow along with our presentation today. Great. So we've told you a little bit about who we are, and now we would love to get a sense of who our attendees are today. So I'm going to queue up this poll question here. If you can please select the type of organization that you currently work for. All right. Here we go. So take a few minutes to fill this out. And then we'll share the answers back with you all so you can see who else is on the call. Give you just a few more seconds. Okay. I'm going to share the results. So it looks like the majority of our attendees today are nonprofit intermediary groups, 26%, 21% nonprofit service organizations, 11% were tied at self-employed, foundation, other nonprofits. We've got 5% for-profit and 16% other. Thank you. We just have 2 more quick questions to ask you to get to know who's in our audience today. Please select the title that best fits your current role. Give you just a few more seconds to answer this question. Okay, great. Looks like majority here are organizational staff at 28%. Welcome. We have some organizational leaders, about 22%, 11% capacity builders, internal to organizations, 17 are capacity builders outside of organizations, and then we've got 11% constituents and 11% board members. Great. And one more quick question. We'd love to know where you're based. We're focusing on a story from the American Southwest today, but we've been lifting up stories from across the country, so we'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Okay. Great. Looks like the majority of our attendees today are from the Northeast Mid-Atlantic region, about a third. And then we've got some folks from the Southwest, about 28%, 17% coming from the South, Southeast, like me. We've got 11% from the West, 6% Midwest, and 6% Northwest. Great. Well, thank you so much. We're so glad you're here. Go through these. Okay, so just want to tell you a little bit about the Building Movement Project. We're your hosts for the Tools to Engage webinar series. And BMP is a national organization that does research to both support and challenge and push organizations to be more focused on social change. And we do that by focusing in three main areas. The first is leadership. We really look at how organizations structure their leadership and then who has those top leadership roles. The second area is service and social change, and then we really look at how direct service organizations and human service organizations engage their clients and constituents to build the voice and power of people they serve. And the third area is movement building, where we look at how organizations collaborate and work together to have more impact than they could on their Tools to Engage, I've been saying that phrase a couple of times. What is that? It's our new website, actually not so new. We launched at the end of September. It's the latest iteration of our service and social change work, and it's a multi-level interactive search platform that connects users with the best tools, resources, and research from across the social sector about engaging clients and constituents more actively. And there are about 150 tools on the site now. And they're not just from BMP, they're from across the social sector. So we really encourage you to check that out. Please sign up as a member. It's free, and you can also submit your own tool that way, as well as engage in dialogue with other users about how you're actually using tools within your own organization. We'd love to hear from you. So the Tools to Engage webinar series is really our opportunity to highlight the innovative ways that groups from across the country are integrating constituents into their organization's work, culture, and values. Our last part one of the webinar series took place about the middle of November, and we highlighted a story from New York City. Today we'll be hearing from folks in New Mexico, and at the end of August we'll be lifting up a story from Northern California. So we're really excited to hear from organizations from across the country, and there will be an invitation later in this webinar to please get in touch with me if you'd like to share the work that your organization is doing to engage your clients and constituents. We'd love to feature you in a future webinar. And quickly, before we move on to the meat of the webinar, we just want to let you know what our framework is. Here at BMP, we strongly believe that people can and want to transform their inner lives and regain the voice and power that is often taken away by outer circumstances. We also believe that all of us rely on services, and for some of us, those services are just more easily accessible or maybe less visible than for others. And finally, we believe strongly that it's both a combination of individual empowerment and collective action that can transform our communities and societies to produce lasting change. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce Leah. Please take it away. I think you might be on mute, Leah. Is that possible?
Hello, everyone. Sorry.
Yay.
On mute there for a minute. All right. So I'm going to go through a few slides to describe the Common Good Action Project. first of all, the advisory committee for Building Movement Project, Building Movement has a local advisory committee here in New Mexico, and they had organized a few big group meetings, pulling together lots of nonprofit organizations and what we call peñas. And the advisory committee really wanted to move further and go into something that allowed nonprofits to engage in more analysis and action around how they might move forward in social change work. So they developed what we call the Common Good Survey. They developed the first sort of version of that, and also made the decision that we should do this Common Good Action Project using a cohort model. So each cohort, we've completed 3 cohorts to date, and we have just started a 4th cohort. They're either geographically based, or they're around a theme, a population served, or another kind of a theme generally. Each cohort has had around 5 to 8 nonprofits, depending on how they come together and how many people apply. And total, so far, 19 organizations have participated in a cohort. And in our new cohort, we actually have about 9 groups joining. So we'll have many nonprofits that have had an opportunity to participate in the Common Good Action Project after this 4th cohort completes. At the end of the cohort activity, which takes about 6 to 8 months, each organization that participates receives a stipend for $2,500. And I'll describe a little bit more the activities, but there are a series of group meetings for the cohort, and also one-on-one support and coordination through the local consultant, which is me. All right, the next slide. This is a tool that we've incorporated more and more into the cohort and the Common Good Action Project. It's called the Scale of Client, or Scale of Constituent Engagement. And you can see that on the left column, that's sort of a description of a level of less involvement for clients to be influencing the organizational decision making. And on the right, which might be, hopefully you can see it, that's a high level of client engagement, where the clients are really have their own power within the organization, they're moving agendas, they're contributing to the decision making, they have a solid role within the organization. So one way we use this client engagement scale is in the very beginning, when organizations are signing up for cohort involvement, they look at this scale and they rate themselves where they think their organization is now and where they'd like to go. So if you look at this, in this cohort, we had 5 organizations participating. So where they mark themselves in the organization right now is in the middle, pretty far advanced. They're not down on the left side of the scale. Most of them are moving toward the upper, the right side of the scale, which is great. And, many of the nonprofits that have engaged with us are very active nonprofits and very interested in social change. And you can see that where they marked where they'd like to be in the future, the majority of them, certainly all moved up, and most of them are on that clients produce their own program or activity in addition to what the organization already offers, and one organization is at the far end of the scale there. We revisit this scale and have it available for the cohort to use in group meetings and in their own organization. All right, sorry Noelia, next slide. So this is a visual that describes the process over 6 to 8 months. So as you can see on the top left, that's the demonstrating the act to say that yes, they want to participate. We have this information for explains the project, explains what the expectations are, and we go through the first major activity, which is going to be applying the Common Good Survey within their organization. So that's the first meeting. And over the course of the 6 to 8 months, we have 4 group meetings. And in between, as you'll see on the left side of this diagram, there's times for the cohort organizations to meet one-on-one with the consultant or the coordinator on the ground, which has been me, and do some coaching, technical assistance, coordination, and just, helping people answer questions that may come up, and just stay on top of the timeline and try to reduce the amount of time that executive directors and others extra time that they have to put into the project. So we have a second cohort meeting after the survey is completed. And in the third cohort meeting, that's an open topic, because each time we've had a cohort, there's been a topic emerge that the group says they want to work more on. So we allow this third cohort time to be available in the event, and each time it's happened, that there's a topic that they want to do some peer learning around. And then the fourth meeting, of course, is to close out the project, to work on their social change action plan and finalizing their social change action plan, which is developed from the results of the surveys, and to just talk about how they plan to implement the action plans within their organization and with each other. Next slide. A little bit more detail about the survey. The Common Good Action Project survey is designed for the organizational staff, leadership, board, volunteers, even clients and constituents to complete. And organizations set up a plan to figure out how they can, get a good number of surveys and get good distribution, so that it's filled out by varying levels across the organization. The survey results often highlight strengths. Each time, I think organizations have been relieved and happy to see that the survey results really show that they have strengths and help them identify areas they want to work on as far as social change goes. And it really helps prompt the conversations in the organization that sometimes are hard to make happen. In the day-to-day work of a service organization, it's hard to take time to step back and just talk about, in addition to all of the services we're providing, how do we move social policy that's going to make a difference to the people that we're trying to serve. So the survey questions just really help prompt that conversation and the planning. Next slide. The next few slides are going to demonstrate just examples of what the results look like. So once the organization completes the survey, each of the organizations in the cohort, they get a slide set that shows what their compiled results, and the survey is anonymous, so the compiled results show in their organization. This one is a basic question about social change, and many of the questions are set up this way, where if they answer, they're asked to answer which is the closest reflection of their own organization. The top one is often sort of the least degree of whatever the question is about, and the last option is the most advanced, kind of an example of what the most advanced would be. So you can see in this social change question, most of the organization's respondents said that it's pretty far advanced. They engage in social change work and involve staff and member representatives, and sometimes the client. And so the ultimate one, where 21% of the organizational respondents answered, that would be the even further level of client engagement and leadership in social change work. Next slide. This slide combines three questions that are all similar around how the board membership, and then the leadership of the organization, the executive leadership, and then the staff match demographically with the population that the organization serves. So as you can see in this example, the highest level of representation of matching demographically with the target population or the population they serve is with staff. And then with leadership and board, it's less so. There's still, definitely some opinions that there is a match, but in general, it's on the staff end of things that there's a match, and less on board and leadership. Next slide. This is a question about the engagement of current or former clients. And again, the top selection, or the blue, would be sort of the least level or beginning level of engagement, client engagement, where the yellow at the final option on the list is the most engaged. And in this slide, you see that almost half of the respondents say that their organization asks clients, current and former, for feedback and guidance in designing meetings and events. So there is client engagement around things that are happening in their organization, but not the ultimate level of agenda setting, planning, being more involved in decision making and driving the organization's work. Next slide. All right, and I just wanted to give a brief description of what social change action plans look like. There are about 30 to 35 questions that are answered by respondents, and we've revised the survey each time slightly so that it's a good fit for the cohort. And then when they get their results, they start thinking about what they want to put in their social change action plan. Usually we talk about the fact that oftentimes it's easier to think of your social change action plan goals falling into 3 action areas, which is internal alignment within your organization, such as communication, strengthening communication around social change, maybe training or staff performance measures are some examples, and there's lots of others. And then client engagement, of course, which is a major component that we are stressing that makes a difference in moving social change advocacy work. And we'll talk some more about those examples when Connie talks about her experience with her organization. And then the third is external alliances and collaborations that you might be able to strengthen, maybe make them more intentional around the social change or in social policy work that you want to move. There's one-on-one coaching that I have been doing around helping them develop their plan, and then we have that final meeting where we really finalize the plans and share goals and intentions and moving forward.
Great.
I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leah. So we'd love to ask our attendees today, which of these steps in the CGAP process do you find most interesting, or would you like to learn a little bit more about? I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll to hear from our participants today. Just a few more seconds. Great. So it looks like folks are really interested in hearing more about the social change action plan development. So I'm excited to be able to present Connie Chavez in just a moment, who will tell us about her organization's experience doing just that. Looks like folks are also interested, about 31%, in the in-person technical assistance, resources, group and one-on-one, sort of how that works within the CGAP process. Looks like about a quarter of folks are really interested in the peer learning through the cohort experience. And we do have some interest in the Common Good organizational survey as well. Thank you so much for responding to that. We appreciate it. And before we go on, just want to take a moment. This is not the official Q&A section, but if there are any technical questions for Leah about the CGAP sort of survey and cohort model, this would be the time to chat that in. Otherwise, we'll move on to hearing directly from Connie. Okay, great. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Connie Chavez, Executive Director of the Barrett Foundation.
Great. Let me make sure that you can hear me. I'm not on mute.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Well, thanks. And I am really glad to be here today to share our story at the Barrett Foundation. The Barrett Foundation, you want to go on to the next slide? Yeah, so the Barrett Foundation is, we have several programs. Our primary program is we're a homeless shelter serving women and children who are experiencing homelessness. Last year, we served 443 women and children through the shelter, over 36,000 meals, an average of 33 women and children every night, and delivered 900 plus case management hours. Go on to the next slide. So I came to this organization in 2013, and I came to it, my background is really in community organizing and affordable housing development. And I came to this organization and took a very part-time job as a housing case manager. And what my initial observations were, coming from a different background, was that the board made all the decisions for the organization in concert with the executive director. The management team, which was the executive director, the programs director, really made decisions and made recommendations to the board. The shelter staff was really unfamiliar with board members, who the board members were, what their role was. They worked on the shelter program only. The housing staff, again, there was a level of unfamiliarity for every staff member about who was supposed to do what the roles were, and how those roles fit together. That trickled down from board to admin. You want to go on to the next slide? Thanks. So we were approached about being a participant in this great program, and with several other homeless service providers. And it was difficult in selecting a team, one, because you heard Leah, and there's quite a commitment involved, and the time involved to do that. Another meeting, another set of several meetings could be wasn't that exciting initially, but it was really because my observation was that this organization was running in silos. We needed to do something different. The language in the organization was not used. Social justice, social change. That language just wasn't present in this organization. So I selected a team, including myself, our shelter assistant who had been here for about 10 years, a rapid rehousing case manager who had been here for about 2.5 years, and the program director. And I have to say there was initial hesitation on everyone's part. One, because we had operated in silos, staff had never really been asked to participate outside of the organization. Inside the organization, much less outside of the organization. So there was some initial hesitation, some fears about whether what they had to say was going to be able to contribute to the conversation. And then again, the number of hours taken away from the regular jobs to do this work. But we got folks on board and we formed a team. I'm going to go on to the next slide. There you go. And so what was exciting about that was we got to participate in developing the survey that helped us to understand. Our team really came at it from a point of, we want to create some change and we want to do it well, and we know we're not doing it now, so let's get actively involved in creating the survey or tailoring it to our community. We had board and all staff participate in the survey. And the survey results really confirmed my initial observations about we were working in silos. It was unfortunate, but the shelter staff did not know that they were providing direct service. They felt like their role was minimal and they had nothing to contribute. And they didn't know anything about what we did on the administration side, how funding worked, how we got clients involved, how we selected clients when we did have an opportunity to have them be interviewed. So the survey was really the catalyst for our board to clearly understand and embrace the need for change. And a social change action plan, to be successful, we really had to set the table within our own organization before we could go out there making change in our community. So it was an amazing thing. That's cool. Go. Okay. All right. So again, our social change action plan had to start within our own organization, because we were sort of dysfunctional, if you will. I'll say that loosely. We're doing great work, but we weren't doing it at an optimum level, and we were not including this social justice, social change aspect in it. So we really needed to bridge that gap between the board, the staff, and the community we served, and to bring our constituents, the people who were receiving services at the Barrett Foundation, at the Barrett House Shelter, how to get them involved, how do we get them engaged in a way that is meaningful and the board and staff could relate that we're all in this together, all doing the same thing. Next slide. So how did we do that? So it was, again, the catalyst for making lots of change. And again, everyone is super hesitant, right? The staff was hesitant about taking the survey. We set it up so that they would be comfortable, yet they would have some privacy to do it, but the team was able to support them in doing that. And the outcome of that was preparing for a board staff retreat, our first ever board staff retreat in the history of this organization, where board members got to meet the staff for the first time, staff got to meet the board, and we invited the staff to participate in the strategic planning process that was embraced, developed, and now on the way to implementation by both board and staff. And again, the outcome was a transformation of the relationship between the board and staff. I was amazed because we had some board members who had been on the board for a very, very long time, even prior to me joining the organization in 2013. I had a staff member who had been here for 10 years and they didn't know each other. That was shocking to me. That was shocking to me that they didn't know what the roles, but anyone did inside the organization. And yet the governance and social change was coming from the board down. So this transformation and this relationship that was generated through this process has really helped the organization to grow and to become a real meaningful player in creating social change. Next slide. So there was also a disconnect between our shelter residents and our board members. And what that meant was our board members weren't, well, they knew what the work was that we were engaged in. They weren't really connected with the clients that we were serving, what their personal journeys were, how they ended up in homelessness situation. So we had to also bridge that gap. And so we said, let's have board members dine with the shelter residents. And we started that informally, at least quarterly, come to dine with residents. That's the best place to get the story, the real story, to really show the face of homelessness is not always who you think it is. And never say never because you never know when. And so this was a really enlightening experience for our board members. We have recently they're coming now once a month. In March, we had 100% board participation. And it was amazing to see. It was amazing for the shelter residents to be able to dine with the board members, to understand what their role was, to give them input about their experience, not only here at the shelter, but their homeless experience. And then most recently, the other thing that happened was our clients weren't allowed to volunteer here prior to this change, this social plan change. They weren't allowed to volunteer here for a variety of reasons. And so we had to change that idea of that's an important role for all participants to be able to volunteer at the organization. They want to give back, and the only way they can really give back is to volunteer their time at this point in their lives. And so we engage them. We have a process for which they can come back and volunteer. And I know the slides got a little out of order for me, but we were able to then take that to the next level, and we have elected our first board member to be our first program participant to be a member of the board. Her first board meeting will be in April. So we're super excited about that. The dialogue that happened around getting someone to be on the board, that engaged the entire community, the folks who are residing in the shelter, our staff, and our board. And it was an amazing conversation that I had not seen before in this organization. And this is really because of our participation in this program. So again, everybody's working in silos. Now what we have is we have this, it takes time, right? So the process to go through this, through the cohort takes, a bit of time, and then to get the board, clients, staff, everybody on the same page. Change doesn't happen overnight, but what we have now is we have staff who are cross-trained, clients who know that they have a voice, they can engage in the work that we're doing. We want them to engage. Board members who are actively participating directly with the board, with the staff and clients. And that opportunity, we had to create that opportunity. So this is, and all staff and board now participate in community outreach, where it just used to be basically the executive director, maybe, who would go out and participate in community outreach. We have people everywhere, at every meeting, every possible opportunity. And the really exciting thing that I think is recently happening is we couldn't get folks to volunteer, staff, board, anybody. And now it's like I have to turn people away to say, sorry, we're full for this one, but you can do the next one. So it's really been an exciting change.
Thank you so much, Connie. I want to give folks who are on the line today the opportunity to ask some questions, and we already had some great questions come in. I'll just take them in the order that we received them. One of the questions we got for you, Connie, is how representative of the community was the board? And I assume that means sort of prior to engaging in the Speak Out process.
So it was not representative at all. It was zero representation. And again, this comes from, nonprofits do a variety of things, a variety of different ways. And it was really, I think the intention was to try to get it to be a fundraising board and folks who had status and wealth in the community, but no connection really to any homelessness experience.
And we have another question. Did you have any issues getting board and staff to agree to the changes?
Well, the dialogue was interesting, and I think because we initially got the 3 staff members involved in the cohort, and they were able to bring the rest. Their job was to come back and to engage the staff, right, and tell them everything that we had been doing. And there were some challenges around how much time does this take in a meeting, right? Everybody's time is precious. So. But we had one amazing board member who stepped up and said, we need to do this, and we need to take as much time as it takes. And that was, and we'll break it up in chunks. We'll do whatever it is we need to do. And was there some hesitancy? Absolutely, all the way around. But we're in a good place now.
Great. And there's a follow-up question to the first question about the representativeness of the board. How representative of the community was the board in terms of race, class, and other identifications?
Zero. Zero. We have gone through a whole board transformation. I will say at that moment in time, the management staff was not representative either. And so we take a look at that now, and we're a very diverse group at this moment in time.
Great. This question is specifically about the outcome around former residents having the opportunity to volunteer. What were the reasons the organization originally had for not allowing former residents to volunteer, and what was the impact of that change to the internal policy?
So the reasons, and this was set in place before, prior to my joining the organization, was really about confidentiality. We're a small community, a large community, but the homeless community is very small. And I think it was a lack of education on our part for understanding that it didn't matter, we all had a story and a place to tell that story, and we needed to find a way to have a meaningful, volunteer, robust program for our program participants. And that didn't just mean sorting clothes or carrying in boxes occasionally. That meant engaging them and asking them what it was that they wanted to do. So we shifted that. So there is a time frame, again, for confidentiality, because they come into the shelter in groups, basically. But after a period of time, they split up and scatter. They've been housed, and their paths change. So we implemented a time frame for them to be able to come back and volunteer. And the policy now is we take a list whenever they're ready to volunteer. And on the short term, if we have a project, like we have a bunch of donations at Christmas time, we invite the women who are currently in the shelter to stay and help us put those away. So we find other volunteer opportunities. But we have former clients who are now answering the phone, who are helping us do some data entry, who help us in the kitchen. So there's a variety. Everybody in any organization has to sign a confidentiality agreement, and you have to trust that.
Great. Connie, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship with other cohort members? What did the CGAP process, or did the CGAP process strengthen collaboration between organizations?
Absolutely. I think for our cohort, we didn't want it to end. And so we're dragging Leah along to saying, hey, help us. We have certain things in our community that arise that impact each one of our organizations. And there's power in numbers, right? And if we're all working towards the same thing, we have a bigger impact if we're working together. So what it really did was, for me, and I think for our group, was acknowledge that the work that we do is hard work. It's not easy. We face the same challenges as our partner organizations, which are money. How do we better serve our community? How do we get people involved? How do we navigate the political climate? All of those things we have in common. And it really helped to support that. It helped my team, our team, to acknowledge that there are other folks out there doing this work, and we didn't have to do this alone.
Okay. How did you prepare the former client to take on a board role?
So I've been in long conversation. There were actually a couple of clients that we were, that had expressed an interest in being on the board or in some sort of governance role or a committee or something to that end. And so we started having the conversation with them. This particular client has volunteers on a regular basis. And so I have great conversations with her about what it would mean to be a board member, that the board was actively committed to being a mentor, that the requirements were that if she could attend a board meeting, we would help with transportation. Whatever the barriers were that she put in place in front of her, we were able to respond to say, let's see if we can eliminate that barrier. Let's see if we can really make this happen. And then I've given her copies of board packets, sort of the information, the meeting materials, invited her to attend a meeting. Unfortunately, she couldn't attend a meeting prior. She met with a couple of board members who were really amazing at coming in and setting the table for inviting her in to actively participate as a board member. So this has been a process that's been taken over about 6 months.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to take 2 more questions I see up here now. One is going back to the CGAP cohort experience. What was the peer learning that happened in the cohort, and how did that help the group?
Oh, Leah, you can jump in on this because you touched every one of the groups, I think. Again, for us, the peer learning was really understanding that every organization, everyone who was serving the homeless community had similar experiences. And the peer learning for us, I think what we took away from that was really how to get this client engagement piece really moving forward.
Very much so. Yes, and I'd just add briefly that in this particular cohort of organizations that serve people experiencing homelessness, one of the members had really moved far, far along in the spectrum as far as having former clients be part of the board. And they had gotten past a lot of the barriers, some of which Connie was talking about: transportation. How do you understand the information? How do you feel like your voice is heard when other people around the table are different than you? They had really sort of overcome barriers and hurdles and figured out they had a whole recruitment strategy and mentoring strategy. So if you remember earlier, I was talking about the group meetings that we had. One of them was the third meeting is a peer learning session that the topic is determined as a cohort is developing. And in this particular cohort that Connie was part of, the peer learning session was actually facilitated by this organization, not the executive director, but one of their staff people who was really moving this process of recruiting former clients to be engaged in different ways throughout the organization, including in the board. So he and a couple of former clients that are on the board did the co-facilitation of the session. And that way, our cohort organizations had a chance to really get into the nitty-gritty of what how you overcome these barriers, how do you do these things, see what their materials look like, and just really have a very close session around how they would do this. And I would say in this cohort of the 5, 3 of them, well, Connie's organization, you heard what she did. 2 others, one has created a client advisory board and another one has plans to create a client advisory board. So something intermediary to their board of directors, and have sought out the coaching from the other organization that has really had a lot of experience in this.
Excellent. Thank you. And just quickly, because I said we would answer the final question, what changes do you hope to see now that a former client is on the board?
Sure. So what we're hoping is that the client, one, is that it'll be the catalyst to get at least one more board member from the homeless community, from the folks that we've served, and maybe to create a task force, something else that can help inform our programming, right? To help inform, we do this work every day, but I've not experienced homelessness, so I can't tell you how to best inform that. And so really to make sure that we are held accountable, right, for the community that we're serving, and to help inform and strengthen our programs, our outreach, anything that might be missing, that from my standpoint, from our board standpoint, we might just be missing the boat. So that's what I'm looking forward to. That's what we're all looking forward to.
Great. Thank you both so much. And thank you all for your questions. They really add so much to this conversation.
Thank you.
So before we let you go, we hope that after this conversation, you want more resources to use in your organization. I just want to make sure you know about this social service and social change process guide and our NICE guide, or Nonprofits Integrating Community Engagement Guide. These are two of the foundational publications that BMP has produced in this area of service and social change and engaging constituent and client voice. Both are chock full of practical tools and tips, and they're both available for free download on toolstoengage.org. And we also have a lot of folks who give us some feedback that they feel a little overwhelmed. Like, we can't, our organization has been doing things in a certain way for a really long time, and we can't just go back and redo the whole organization. Or maybe the person is on line staff and says, well, I feel like I don't have that much power. I'm not the executive director. I can't change my whole organization. And so I want to direct you to this series of 5% shifts. And there are 5 mini reports that all include conceptual framing, case studies, discussion guides, and tools and handouts. And they're geared at lifting up the small organizational shifts that are happening across the countries that are making and having a really big impact on supporting client voice and power. And of course, those are also available for free download on toolstoengage.org. And there it is again, just directing you back to that site. We hope you find it useful, and please give us any feedback on how to improve that site for you, other tools you'd like to see on there, how it can best serve you. That's really what it's there for. And methods of participation. So if you're interested in continuing this conversation, oh, got a quick question. What does NICE stand for again? It's Nonprofits Integrating Constituent Engagement. Yeah, hope you check that guide out. There's so much in there, and Tools to Engage is actually based on the NICE guide. So all of the tools that are in the NICE guide are also on Tools to Engage. So we hope that you're interested in continuing this conversation about constituent and client engagement. One of the ways to do that is by logging on to Tools to Engage, signing up as a member, submitting your own tool, and engaging in conversation in the forum section, as well as in the commenting sections. We also hope that you'll continue attending these Tools to Engage webinars. We're going to be doing them quarterly, so we have our next one set up for the end of August, and may or may not have one set up for the end of November already as well. So we're really excited about that. And as I said, last time we focused on a story from New York City. Today, of course, we heard from New Mexico. Next time we'll be hearing from California. We'd love to lift up the work that organizations are doing across the country to engage their clients and constituents. So if you're interested in having your work be highlighted, please send me an email. My email address is right there, nman@buildingmovement.org. I would love to hear from you and the work your organization is doing. And we also invite you to attend or request a service and social change training from BMP. Again, you can contact me. We'd love to be in touch. And we also want to make sure that you know about this funding opportunity. It's so hard to do this work without the investment, without the infrastructure. So we definitely want you to know about the Fund for Shared Insights Listen for Good initiative. It makes grants and provides technical assistance to groups looking to improve their work by listening to the people they seek to help. I believe, though, that is open until June 29th, if I'm not mistaken. So we certainly encourage you to seek out some funding through that opportunity. And finally, I just have one more quick question to learn more about how we can tailor the way that we communicate with you about constituent engagement to better serve your needs. So please take one moment to fill out this last poll question. I'll launch it right now. Here we go. What mode would be most useful to help your organization and others continue to engage in this conversation about constituent engagement? Thank you so much for responding to these poll questions. They help us so much. Just a few more seconds on this one. Okay. Great. Folks like the webinars. That's awesome. We will definitely continue them. You'll be getting an invitation to our next webinar in August. Can't wait to see you there. And I lied. I have one more question for you. It's that 13% who said they wanted to get some reading materials. How often do you want to hear from us? This is always the big question. There are so many, folks are getting so many emails. Our inboxes are all so full. How often do you want to get reading materials on constituent engagement and hear about what's coming up on Tools to Engage? Okay. Great. It looks like monthly is the way to go. That's fabulous. Some people want to hear from us weekly. That makes me very, very happy. Great. Well, thank you so much. Connie, Leah, thank you for your time and for adding your experience and expertise. Thank you all to our participants today. We loved having you join us, and we hope that you'll be back for our next Tools to Engage webinar part 3 at the end of August. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.